Hollywood's golden age dazzled the world with glittering premieres, radiant stars, and the promise of cinematic perfection. To millions, it seemed like paradise. Red carpets rolled out for icons who appeared flawless in every way. Yet behind that silver screen magic, a darker truth lingered in the shadows. James Stewart, America's beloved Mr. Smith, once hinted at secrets that few dared to confront. He spoke of predators who preyed on the innocent, tyrants who ruled their homes with cruelty, and stars whose real lives were far more disturbing than the villains they portrayed on screen. These were not scripts, but chilling realities carefully concealed for decades. Stewart's revelations cracked Hollywood's shining facade, leaving stains that no Oscar could polish away. Charlie Chaplin, the genius who hid scandal. Behind the smile, for millions around the world, Charlie Chaplin was the very embodiment of joy. His creation, The Little Tramp, became a symbol of hope during the silent era. With nothing more than a bowler hat, a cane, and a mischievous grin, he made audiences laugh, cry, and believe in the magic of cinema. Newspapers called him the most recognizable man alive, a universal language of laughter that could cross every border. To the public eye, Chaplin was not simply an actor. He was a genius, a visionary, a saint of comedy. But James Stewart once warned, behind that bowler hat was not just laughter, but obsession and ruin. And when the curtains were pulled back, the portrait was far from charming. The scandals began early and never stopped. In 1924, at age 35, Chaplin married Lita Grey, a 15-year-old girl he had met while casting for one of his films. The news exploded across headlines. The world's greatest comedian secretly wed to a child bride. Court records later revealed the circumstances were even darker. Grey was already pregnant, and Chaplin faced threats of prosecution unless he agreed to marry her. Their marriage quickly turned toxic, with accusations of cruelty, infidelity, and humiliation. When Grey finally divorced him, her testimony described a man who controlled every aspect of her life, turning their Beverly Hills home into a prison. The public was shocked, but this was only the beginning. Chaplin's name appeared again and again in courtrooms, linked to paternity suits and whispers of predatory behavior. One case in the 1940s forced him to submit to a blood test after actress Joan Barry accused him of fathering her child. Though science later cleared him, the scandal never faded. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI seized the moment, branding Chaplin morally corrupt and adding his name to files alongside suspected communists. It was not simply his politics that unnerved America, but the long shadow of his personal life. Chaplin was accused of pursuing girls half his age, surrounding himself with young companions while cultivating the image of a timeless innocent on screen. Behind closed doors, friends described a man consumed by obsession with control, with youth, with the need to dominate those around him. By the early 1950s, Chaplin's enemies finally got their revenge. While traveling to London for a film premiere, the U.S. government revoked his re-entry permit. The genius who once made the world laugh was now an exile, banished from the country that had crowned him a king of comedy. He would never live in America again. And yet, Hollywood still polished his legend. Awards were given, retrospectives aired, and his name remained etched in the pantheon of cinema. But James Stewart's voice lingered like an echo. Chaplin gave the world joy, but to those closest to him, he gave something far different. The genius of silent comedy left a legacy of laughter, yes, but also of scandal, ruin, and a silence more haunting than any film he ever made. Ethel Gumm, the mother who sold her daughter to Hollywood. To the outside world, Judy Garland was the voice of innocence. When she sang Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz, audiences believed they were hearing the pure soul of a young girl dreaming of brighter skies. She was America's sweetheart, a child star who grew into one of the greatest performers of the 20th century. Her smile lit up screens, her voice seemed eternal, and her charm appeared untouched by darkness. But James Stewart once lowered his voice in an interview and said, "Her mother didn't raise her, she drained her." And behind Judy Garland's rise was one of Hollywood's most chilling stories of exploitation, beginning at home with her own mother, Ethel Gumm. From the very start, Judy's childhood was not her own. Ethel, a failed performer herself, saw in Judy a chance to live the dream she never could. At just 10 years old, Judy was pushed onto stages night after night, the lights blinding, the applause addictive. But the cost was terrifying. To keep her awake and energetic for late-night performances, Ethel gave her amphetamines. To make sure she could sleep before school the next morning, she forced down barbiturates. A cycle of drugs and control was established before Judy even became a teenager. When MGM discovered Judy, they only magnified the cruelty. Executives saw her not as a child, but as a product to be perfected. Studio doctors continued the pill regimen: pep pills for energy, sleeping pills for rest. They ordered her diet restricted to black coffee, chicken soup, and cigarettes, mocking her for being the fat one compared to slimmer starlets. Judy later confessed she was locked in a prison of schedules, cameras, and constant monitoring. All the while, Ethel Gumm stood by, not as a protector, but as an enforcer. Witnesses recalled her waiting off stage, arms crossed, glaring if Judy missed a note or faltered in her smile. One MGM insider later said, "Ethel didn't act like a mother. She acted like a stage manager paid in her daughter's tears." The consequences were devastating. Judy Garland grew up dependent on pills, unable to sleep without them, unable to function without them. Her relationships collapsed, her health deteriorated, and her life became a spiral of rehearsals, applause, and breakdowns. The world adored her voice, but the woman behind it was crumbling. James Stewart, reflecting on Garland's tragedy, said simply, "Hollywood didn't steal her childhood. Her mother handed it over." By the time Judy died at just 47, broken by addiction and exhaustion, her story had become the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when fame and family unite not in love, but in ambition. The world mourned her, yet the shadow of Ethel Gumm remained, a mother remembered not for protecting her child, but for selling her soul to the cruel machinery of Hollywood. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, who became the master of control. Alfred Hitchcock was hailed as the master of suspense, a genius who could make audiences grip their seats with nothing more than a camera angle or a perfectly timed silence. Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, his films redefined the art of storytelling. Critics crowned him a visionary, a pioneer who shaped the language of cinema itself. To the world, he was a maestro, a man who could turn fear into art. But James Stewart, who worked with him, once remarked, "Hitchcock didn't just direct films, he directed fear into people's lives." And behind the camera, Hitchcock's genius often came with cruelty, manipulation, and a thirst for domination. The most notorious case was that of actress Tippi Hedren, star of The Birds. To audiences, she was glamorous, poised, the perfect Hitchcock blonde. But to Hedren herself, the role was a nightmare. She later revealed that Hitchcock obsessed over her both professionally and personally, demanding complete submission. When she resisted his advances, the punishment was swift and merciless. During the filming of The Birds, Hedren was promised mechanical props for a key attack scene. Instead, Hitchcock ordered live birds to be hurled at her for days. Their wings beat against her face, their claws scratched her skin, their beaks tore at her flesh. Hedren collapsed in exhaustion and terror, later saying she felt like a prisoner on set. At one point, Hitchcock locked her in a room with the birds, refusing to stop the cameras until she broke. This was not suspense. It was torment, inflicted by a man who blurred the line between art and cruelty. Crew members whispered about his sadistic streak, how he enjoyed watching actresses suffer under his control. And yet, the industry stayed silent. Hitchcock was too powerful, too profitable. His reputation as a genius shielded the darker truth. For James Stewart, the memory lingered. Hitchcock could create masterpieces, yes, but the price was often a human soul. He built fear frame by frame, Stewart said, but sometimes he built it into the very lives of the people who trusted him. The master of suspense left behind iconic films that changed history, but for those who stood in his shadow, the legacy was not brilliance. It was fear, scars, and silence. Fatty Arbuckle, the fallen clown who turned laughter into horror. In the early days of Hollywood, one man could make entire theaters roar with laughter without speaking a single word. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was the silent era's giant, literally and figuratively. With his round face, childlike charm, and astonishing physical comedy, he became one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Crowds adored him. Studios banked fortunes on him. To the public, he was a harmless clown, a figure of joy during the restless 1910s and early 1920s. But James Stewart later warned, "They called it a party, but it was a crime scene." He was speaking of the scandal that destroyed Arbuckle's career and forever marked Hollywood with one of its darkest stains. It happened in September 1921. Arbuckle threw a lavish party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. The rooms were filled with bootleg liquor, music, and guests eager to bask in Hollywood glamour. Among them was a young actress named Virginia Rapp. Hours later, she was found in agony, screaming with pain. Within days, she was dead. The cause? A ruptured bladder. Rumors spread like wildfire. The press painted lurid images of a drunken Arbuckle crushing her with his massive weight, or worse, violating her in a frenzy of abuse. Headlines screamed across the nation. "The party that shocked Hollywood," blared the Los Angeles Examiner. Small towns banned Arbuckle's films. Churches denounced him from pulpits. To Middle America, the beloved clown had become a monster overnight. Arbuckle was arrested and put on trial for manslaughter. Courtrooms overflowed with spectators. Reporters described the atmosphere as a circus, one fueled by outrage, gossip, and moral panic. Though medical evidence was inconclusive and witnesses conflicted, the public had already convicted him in their hearts. After 3 grueling trials, Arbuckle was finally acquitted. The jury even issued an apology, stating he had endured a great injustice. But it was too late. The stain of scandal never washed away. Studios abandoned him, audiences refused to forgive, his films were banned, his name erased from marquees. The man once beloved as Hollywood's first great comedian was reduced to whispers and exile. Behind the comedy mask, Stewart said, was a darker truth. Arbuckle represented Hollywood's first true scandal, the moment when Americans realized their idols were not saints, but flawed, even dangerous people. He made the world laugh, Stewart reflected, but one night turned laughter into horror. Arbuckle attempted a comeback under a pseudonym, directing small pictures and even acting in a few comedies. But the shadow of Virginia Rapp's death followed him everywhere. In 1933, at just 46, Arbuckle died of a heart attack, the weight of disgrace still pressing down. Today, some remember him as a pioneer of slapstick. Others as the man whose scandal nearly destroyed Hollywood itself. But James Stewart's words leave no comfort. They called it a party, but it was a crime scene. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, whose crown hid cruelty. In the 1930s and 1940s, no star shone brighter than Clark Gable. With his rugged jawline, devil-may-care grin, and magnetic charisma, he earned the title the King of Hollywood. When he appeared in Gone with the Wind as Rhett Butler, audiences swooned. Critics called him the man every woman wanted, and every man wanted to be. To the public, he was charm incarnate, the ultimate leading man. But James Stewart once broke the illusion with a single line: "Even kings wore crowns of cruelty." And behind Gable's dazzling smile was a secret that MGM spent decades burying. The rumor began in 1935 when Gable was cast opposite rising star Loretta Young in The Call of the Wild. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable. Off-screen, however, whispers painted a darker picture. During filming, Gable allegedly assaulted Young, leaving her terrified and isolated. Months later, Young disappeared from the public eye, claiming illness. When she returned, she was quietly raising a ward, a little girl named Judy. For decades, Hollywood insiders suspected the truth. Judy was Gable's daughter. MGM, desperate to protect its golden boy, orchestrated an elaborate cover-up. Studio executives arranged for Young to vanish during her pregnancy, later spinning a story that she had adopted the child. Publicists threatened reporters, and anyone daring to speak openly found themselves silenced. Gable continued his rise to superstardom, while Young lived under the crushing weight of a secret she was forced to keep. For Judy, the truth remained hidden well into adulthood. It wasn't until the 1990s, through DNA testing and Young's later confessions, that the full story emerged. Clark Gable, the King of Hollywood, had fathered a child through an encounter her mother never spoke of willingly. The contrast was staggering. On screen, Gable was the romantic hero who told Scarlett O'Hara, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Don't." Off-screen, he was protected by a machine that cared only for profits, not for the truth. Loretta Young, a devout Catholic, carried both the shame and the silence, forced to smile for cameras while living with wounds the world never saw. Stewart reflected bitterly. Hollywood crowned him a king, but even kings can leave scars that last for generations. Clark Gable died in 1960 at the age of 59, remembered as a legend, a symbol of old Hollywood glamour. Yet the secret of Loretta Young and Judy Lewis remains one of the industry's darkest cover-ups. A reminder that sometimes the men who played heroes on screen were anything but heroic behind closed doors. Marilyn Monroe. The goddess Hollywood sold, while she slowly died. Few faces in history are as instantly recognizable as Marilyn Monroe's. With her platinum hair, breathy voice, and playful smile, she was Hollywood's ultimate creation, the embodiment of beauty, sensuality, and innocence, all wrapped into one. From Gentlemen Prefer Blondes to Some Like It Hot, she became the world's fantasy, a goddess projected in glowing light onto silver screens across the globe. To millions, she was magic. To the studios, she was money. But James Stewart once said, "They sold her smile to the world while she was dying inside." And behind the allure, Marilyn Monroe was less a star and more a prisoner, caught in the gears of a system that valued profit over people. From the moment she signed with 20th Century Fox, Monroe was molded like clay. Executives dictated how she dressed, how she spoke, even how she walked. Every curve of her body was marketed, every whisper rehearsed. And when Monroe longed for respect as an actress, she was mocked, told she was nothing more than a pin-up with a wiggle. Her desperate attempts to take serious roles were dismissed, while the studio forced her into shallow comedies designed only to cash in on her image. Behind the glamour, Monroe was pushed into relationships that benefited others more than herself. Affairs with powerful men, from studio heads to politicians, were whispered about in hushed tones, each adding to her legend while eroding her sense of self. She trusted those closest to her, only to be betrayed time and again. Managers, lovers, and so-called friends drained her financially and emotionally, leaving her increasingly isolated. To keep up the facade, Monroe turned to pills, first to sleep, then to wake, and finally to numb herself from the endless cycle of pressure and loneliness. By her early 30s, she was dependent, her nights haunted by insomnia, her days fogged with sedatives. What the audience saw as the glowing smile of America's sweetheart was, in truth, the mask of a woman unraveling. Her death in 1962 remains one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries. Found lifeless in her Los Angeles home, she was only 36. Officially ruled a probable suicide, whispers of foul play have never disappeared. Rumors of political connections, hidden diaries, and secrets too dangerous to reach the light. Stewart, reflecting on her tragedy, remarked, "Hollywood promised her the world, then handed her a coffin draped in lies." Marilyn Monroe's story is not just the fall of a star, it is the indictment of a system that devoured her. She was worshipped by millions, but abandoned by those who should have protected her. Her legacy sparkles in celluloid, but her truth is etched in shadows. Hollywood sold the dream of Marilyn Monroe, and in doing so, it sold her soul. Howard Hughes, the tycoon who bought Hollywood and sold its soul. Howard Hughes was larger than life, a billionaire aviator, engineer, and film producer who seemed to embody the American dream. He built record-breaking airplanes, produced big-budget movies, and dated some of the most glamorous women in the world. To the public, Hughes was the ultimate visionary, a man whose genius reached from the skies down to Hollywood Boulevard. But James Stewart once remarked, "He bought Hollywood, but sold its soul." Behind the legend of brilliance was a darker obsession that left broken lives scattered across the industry. Hughes's fixation on young actresses became notorious. He scoured casting calls, inviting bright-eyed hopefuls into his orbit with promises of stardom. Many were barely out of high school, dazzled by the idea of being discovered by one of Hollywood's richest men. But once inside his circle, they often found themselves trapped, literally. Hughes was known to install women in luxury hotels, locking them away under strict surveillance. Meals were delivered at set times, phone calls were monitored, and freedom was rationed like a commodity. To the outside world, it looked like Hughes was sponsoring talent. In reality, it was imprisonment dressed up as opportunity. Those who resisted him paid a steep price. More than one young actress who rejected Hughes found her career suddenly withering. Casting directors stopped calling. Studio contracts vanished. Friends drifted away, unwilling to cross the most powerful man in town. One producer later admitted, "If Hughes blacklisted you, no one would touch you." His wealth didn't just buy films and airplanes, it bought silence, obedience, and fear. As the years passed, Hughes withdrew further into paranoia. He became a recluse, hiding in darkened hotel suites with tissues covering doorknobs, terrified of germs, but still exercising control over the women in his life. His empire grew even as his humanity shrank. For James Stewart, the lesson was bitter. Hollywood had celebrated Hughes as a titan of imagination, while ignoring the trail of victims left behind. "He could build planes that reached the heavens," Stewart said, "but on the ground, he caged human beings." Howard Hughes died in 1976, a frail shell of the man he once appeared to be. His fortune remained, his legend endured, but the women whose lives he derailed were left only with scars and silence. Joan Crawford, the Oscar queen who ruled her home with terror. To moviegoers, Joan Crawford was the epitome of Hollywood glamour. She rose from a poor Texas childhood to become one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation. Her performance in Mildred Pierce earned her an Academy Award and the title Queen of the Screen. Magazines praised her elegance, her resilience, her supposed devotion as a mother who adopted children and posed proudly with them for glowing photo spreads. To the world, Crawford was proof that reinvention and determination could conquer anything. But James Stewart once cut through the myth with a single line. An Oscar can't hide cruelty. Crawford proved that. And behind the carefully staged photographs lay a household ruled by fear. The most chilling testimony came from her adopted daughter, Christina, whose memoir, Mommy Dearest, tore apart the illusion of the perfect Hollywood family. Christina described a world where wire hangers became weapons, ashtrays became missiles, and affection was replaced with control. If Christina disobeyed, she was forced to kneel for hours before a crucifix or stand motionless as an hourglass drained. Every grain of sand was a reminder of her mother's iron grip. Former maids and classmates corroborated the horror. One remembered Christina appearing at school in long sleeves during sweltering heat, whispering that her mother didn't want the bruises to show. Another described nights when Crawford, drunk and raging, would storm into bedrooms, demanding her children sing patriotic songs until exhaustion left them trembling. The cruelty didn't end with Crawford's life. When her will was read in 1977, Christina and her brother Christopher were cut out entirely with the cold phrase, "for reasons which are well known to them." It was one final act of punishment from beyond the grave. Hollywood, eager to protect one of its icons, looked the other way for decades. Photographers captured stage smiles, while journalists repeated the fairy tale of a devoted mother. But those who lived inside her mansion knew the truth. Joan Crawford ruled not with love, but with terror. James Stewart's words still echo. The Academy may honor brilliance on screen, but no golden statue can erase the cruelty inflicted in private. Crawford's legacy is a haunting reminder that stardom and monstrosity can live under the same roof. John Wayne, the screen cowboy who shot down human dignity. For generations of Americans, John Wayne was the ultimate hero. The towering cowboy with a gravelly voice and steady stride, he embodied courage, grit, and patriotic strength. From stagecoach to true grit, he was the man who always stood tall, gun in hand, defending the frontier or leading troops into battle. To millions, Wayne wasn't just an actor. He was America itself, wrapped in boots and a Stetson hat. But James Stewart once stripped away the myth with a cold observation. He played cowboys, but behind the camera, he shot down human dignity. And the truth about Wayne's off-screen life revealed a man far removed from the noble characters he portrayed. Wayne's temper and drinking habits were infamous. Crew members whispered about his violent outbursts after long nights of whiskey. Extras spoke of being shoved or berated, while younger actors often found themselves bullied into submission. On more than one set, Wayne's presence inspired not admiration, but fear. If he didn't like you, one stuntman later recalled, you'd feel it in your bones, sometimes literally. Then came the words that would forever tarnish his legend. In a 1971 Playboy interview, Wayne openly expressed racist and white supremacist views, declaring he believed in white dominance and dismissing entire communities with language that stunned readers. His comments drew outrage, yet many in Hollywood stayed quiet, unwilling to challenge the icon who symbolized American masculinity. For countless fans, the revelation was a betrayal. The hero who fought for freedom on screen had mocked it off-screen. Rumors also shadowed Wayne's relationships with women on set. Actresses spoke quietly of harassment, of crude remarks and unwelcome advances, dismissed as just Duke being Duke. Protected by his fame, Wayne rarely faced consequences. The same studio system that promoted him as America's guardian angel also worked tirelessly to silence his victims. By the time of his death in 1979, Wayne was still celebrated as a national treasure. Streets, airports, and schools bore his name. Yet behind the statues and medals lay a darker truth. His legacy was not only built on film, but also on the silencing of those he harmed. James Stewart summed it up with unflinching honesty. Hollywood adored Wayne's image, but that image was a mask. The cowboy who defended justice on screen often betrayed it in real life. Spencer Tracy, the saint of the screen who hid his rage in the shadows. Spencer Tracy was revered as one of Hollywood's greatest actors. With his understated style and quiet strength, he won 2 Academy Awards and defined a generation of screen artistry. Critics called him a priest of performance, a man whose Catholic devotion and moral integrity gave depth to every role. To audiences, Tracy was not just an actor. He was a symbol of decency, dignity, and timeless humanity. But James Stewart once cut through that shining image with a single line. He wore virtue in public, but at night he drowned it in whiskey and rage. Behind the respect, Tracy carried demons that no studio press release ever revealed. In private, Tracy battled alcoholism with a ferocity that left scars on everyone around him. Colleagues described nights when he staggered through sets, slurring, fists clenched, his charm replaced by menace. Production crews learned to stay silent, directors learned to accommodate his mood swings, and studio heads paid to cover broken bottles and bruised egos. His long, complicated relationship with Katharine Hepburn became Hollywood legend. On screen, they were the perfect pair, sparring with wit and passion. Off-screen, their romance was marked by turbulence. Friends recalled Hepburn showing up to sets pale and shaken after nights of Tracy's drunken rages. Though she loved him fiercely, she endured storms that few outsiders ever knew. She carried his pain, one insider later admitted, but also his fury. Tracy's violence wasn't limited to Hepburn. Fellow actors and junior colleagues described humiliations, sudden outbursts, even physical aggression when the bottle overtook him. Yet the public never saw it. MGM, desperate to protect its crown jewel, buried every report. Gossip columnists were warned off, and whispers of Tracy's abuse were replaced with glowing portraits of his Catholic piety and artistic brilliance. It was this contradiction, Hollywood's saint in the spotlight, Hollywood's tyrant in the shadows, that haunted Stewart. Spencer was a genius, he admitted, but genius does not erase cruelty. Hollywood decided it was easier to silence the truth than to risk the loss of its angel. By the time Tracy died in 1967, the world mourned the passing of a legend. Newspapers celebrated his devotion to faith, his partnership with Hepburn, his extraordinary talent. But for those who lived with him, the memory was darker, a man whose battles with alcohol turned him into both victim and villain. James Stewart's verdict was simple and merciless. Spencer Tracy's brilliance may endure on film, but his private life stands as proof that even the most celebrated heroes of Hollywood's golden age often wore halos made of shadows. James Stewart once warned, Hollywood wasn't a dream factory, it was a nightmare factory. For every red carpet smile, there was a hidden scar. For every golden statue raised in triumph, there was a story buried beneath silence, fear, and cover-ups. The legends we admire on screen were often far from the heroes they pretended to be. But this is more than a tale of old Hollywood. It is a reminder for us today. Fame does not equal virtue. Power does not guarantee morality. And sometimes, the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. The haunting question remains. Was Stewart simply a whistleblower, or was he, too, guarding demons of his own? Perhaps we will never know. But the lesson is clear. Never confuse the image with the truth, and never forget that behind the glitter of celebrity, real human lives carry the cost.